Good evening, and welcome to a special edition of the MUFON podcast. I'm Richard Beckwith. Tonight, Dan Harari, a longtime resident of Beverly Hills, California, is best known for his 40-plus years of work in Hollywood as an entertainment industry publicist and as the owner of the boutique Asbury PR agency. During the course of his long PR career, he has worked with many dozens of famous celebrities from the fields of movies, TV, rock, and pop music. Dan is also a longtime UFO researcher, a 3-time UFO experiencer, and a longtime member of the Los Angeles-based UFO group UPARS, the UFO and Paranormal Research Society, formerly known as MUFON LA. Dan Harari, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. It's really exciting for me to be here.
I'm very happy to have you here. And before we talk about your book, and that we're going to spend some time talking about that, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself so that our viewers know who you are.
Sure. My name is Dan Harari. I grew up on the New Jersey shore, and when I was this is an interesting part of my life. When I was in high school in the early 70s, I was the stage manager for a little rock concert hall in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Well, who's from Asbury Park, New Jersey? Bruce Springsteen. So I worked with Bruce Springsteen when I was 16 years old. My hair was down to here. I was a drummer. And Bruce, it wasn't even the E Street Band. It was called the Bruce Springsteen Band. And this was February 1973. Bruce played his very first album, Greetings from Asbury Park. My best friend and I ran this little concert hall. We set up his equipment. We did his stage lights. And after the show, we looked at Bruce. We went, Bruce, what'd you think of us? He goes, "Oh, you cats are incredible. You cats are incredible." I met Bruce Springsteen long before most people on planet Earth had ever heard of him.
Oh, that's amazing. And you grew up with music in your soul, I'm assuming?
Well, very much so. Very much so. My father was, and there's a lot to talk about regarding my father, but my father was an electronics engineer for the Army for 45 years. But, Richard, he was also a gifted trombonist. He loved to play the trombone. My father, he was in big bands most of his life until he got elderly. My father was in big bands. My mother is still alive. She was a singer, an actress, a playwright, a pianist, and a stage director. And my mother is super, super creative and super talented. So when I was very little, my dad would be in big bands and my mom would be in plays. So I grew up with both of my parents being literally on a stage. When I was 7, I started playing classical piano until the age of 10. When I turned 10, 1966, the Monkees came on TV. I saw the Monkees, Richard, and I fell in love literally with Mickey Dolenz because I befriended him 20 years later. That's another story. I actually became friends with him. But when I was 10 and the Monkees came, I said, "Mommy, Daddy, I don't want to play piano anymore. I want to play the drums." So they bought me for my bar mitzvah a couple of years later, a beautiful Ludwig Sky Blue Pearl 1968 drum set. I still have it. It's a collector's item. And so I've been playing the drums since the age of 10. I'll be 67 in June. So that's how long I've been playing the drums.
Oh,
Music,
that's wonderful.
Very much in my family.
Yeah. Now, do you think that, and we're going to start talking about your experiences, but do you think maybe your love of music or that part of you is also somehow a part of your interest in the subject that we're talking about tonight, which is, of course, UFOs and your book?
Not really. My love for music and rock and roll, man, I was a hardcore hippie. I had very, very long hair. I worked with some of the biggest rock bands in the world when I was in high school. Humble Pie, Jay Giles, Fleetwood Mac, Kiss. I worked with Kiss before they were famous. Edgar Winter, Mott the Hoople, Deep Purple. I was a rock and roller, man. I was for a long time. So music didn't weave into my UFO story. But what really did kick this off for me in my life was in 1970, I was 14 years old, and my dad worked at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. It was an Army fort. And one day he picked me up from, I believe it was Hebrew school. I think it was a Sunday, actually. He picked me up from Hebrew school, drove me home. It was about 4 p.m. in the afternoon, daylight, and in my residential street in New Jersey near Asbury Park. And as we're driving in my neighborhood in my dad's car, a giant silver V, a craft that was a V, like the letter Victor, just was hovering over our car, directly over our car. And it was pretty stationary and it was enormous, silver and enormous, right? So I'm 14. I'm like, Dad, stop the car. Dad, stop the car. So you have him jumping up and down in the passenger. Dad, stop the car. Stop the car. It's just hovering like this. So my dad and I get out of the car, stand in the front of the car. We look up. I am Richard. I'm jumping up and down. Dad, oh my God. You look, Dad, look at this. Look, isn't this great? Isn't this cool? Isn't this cool? My father looked at it like he was looking at a head of lettuce in the grocery store. No expression. Nothing. Nothing at all.
Really?
Like, honestly, like it was commonplace. No expression on his face. Then he said, let's go home and get in the car. I go home. I called the Asbury Park Press newspaper. I remember very clearly. I said, hi, my name is Danny. I'm 14. I just saw a UFO in my neighborhood. I want to report it to the newspaper. The lady goes, young man, I can't talk to you right now. I'm getting hundreds of calls about this. I can't talk to you right now. I'm really sorry. I remember that very clearly. Nothing ever ran in the paper. Nothing ever ran in the paper. My father passed away in 2017. What is that, 7 years ago? Almost 7 years ago. After he died, Richard, I was at a restaurant waiting for a pastrami sandwich to be delivered. I was at a restaurant waiting for my pastrami sandwich to come to me. And as God is my witness, I was sitting at the table waiting for my sandwich, and the whole experience with my father in 1970 it came to me into my brain as though I saw it like a movie. And I remembered that not only did he have no expression, but after he winked at me and said, come on, let's go home. So so Richard, my book was born when I was waiting for my pastrami sandwich. And I just wrote down on the table, on the menu, on the table, I put, man finds out his late dad worked with aliens. And he never knew during his father's lifetime. I wrote that sentence. And then I wrote ATC, the letters, ATC, capital ATC. I didn't know what it meant. Didn't even know what that was. And I was like, what could that be? What is that? What is it? And then it came to me after they came. What is it? Aliens come to Earth. They saved mankind. And the lead character, based on my life, finds out that his father worked with aliens decades earlier in the past. So the whole book came to me.
And that protagonist's name is Jonathan Michael Tuckerman. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. I had a next door neighbor when I was a kid named Todd Tuckerman, and all my friends looked up to him because he was older and he could play basketball really well. So it was an homage to a neighbor I had.
So tell us some more about your protagonist.
So the protagonist is Jonathan Michael Tucker. In the book, at the beginning, he reaches his 70th birthday and he's miserable. He just is absolutely miserable. His business, he lives in Los Angeles. His business went bankrupt. His children, both of his children are estranged. He's long divorced from his second wife. He accidentally killed his first wife in a tragic car accident. He's unlucky in love. He owes a lot of money to a lot of people. And he's just said, you know what? I'm 70 years old. My life sucks. I just hate my life. I just hate it. I don't want to be here anymore. So the first chapter of the book, this character gets in his car. He drives to Malibu. At least if he's going to kill himself, he might as well be in Malibu. He goes to Malibu.
What a way to go, huh?
The next Senate. He drinks a huge bottle of vodka, he takes 1,000,000 pills, takes off his clothes. He goes, that's it. I'm done. That's it. And that's all. I'm done. He swims out to sea naked and he's swimming. And all he wants to do is die. That's all he wants to do. That's his goal, is to drown. It's literally his 70th birthday as he's drowning. He's drowning in the Pacific. as he's drowning, he sees through the water. He thinks the moon is turning colors. His last thought, is the moon turning colors? Well, it's an enormous UFO. An enormous UFO comes out of the Pacific right above him, beams him on board. He's naked, beams him on board, and this huge, enormous, massive, beautiful, swirling color object slowly hovers over all of Los Angeles. It's so obviously not of this world and so obviously not man-made that every media and people with cell phones and the police and ambulances and fire trucks and military, everyone knows, okay, clearly they're here now. This giant diamond-shaped craft slowly goes over LA, stops at Dodger Stadium. It stops above Dodger Stadium. There, so all the assembled media, the military, the police, camera crews, everybody, hundreds of people are there waiting for like this close encounter because it's right there. It's clearly right there. And the lemon yellow light comes out, two magnificent, tall, white Nordic aliens. Beautiful man, 7 foot tall man, long white hair, pale skin, blue eyes, white silvery robe. Equally beautiful woman, looks like him. They both beam down. And then they beam down this naked guy. This naked guy was basically dead. So he's like a floppy fish. He's like spinning in this beam of light. He doesn't know what's happening. He was basically dead. He came back to life. So the three of them are there at Dodger Stadium. And the aliens say to all assembled, mankind, we are here to help you. Don't be afraid of us. We are not evil. We're not angry. We love you. We've been here a very, very long time. We've been watching out for you for a very, very long time. We have decided that now is our time to reveal ourselves to you because there are so many problems in your world that are man-made problems that you're not able to cure your own ills. We're here to help you. But here's the catch. We will only work through this man who's floating right there. So this guy who was 70 and suicidal in bed, but that was it. We will only work with him. He's our conduit to you on the earth. We have a relationship with him. So we're going to work. You have problems, bring them to him. We will work through him and him alone. So they slowly lower him down onto second base. His nickname, the Secret Service later calls him second base. That's his nickname. Lowers him down. He's naked. The beautiful aliens go back in the ship. Ship takes off. It's gone. So now all of the press in Los Angeles and the media and the military and the firemen and the police, they're all descending on this guy. And this poor guy, he looks up and he goes, I know. I know he has no idea what's happening to him. That's the first 3 chapters. Well, from there, they bring him to Washington, D.C. to meet the President of the United States. Now, in my book, I based the president on Oprah Winfrey. Because when I first wrote the first draft, it was 2017. My dad had just died. And I don't know if you'll remember, but there was a rumor that she might run for president in 20...
I do recall that, yes.
It was like a rumor, like, Oprah for president. So
right.
I wrote
There were a lot. I think she was actually seriously thinking about it.
Boy, I wish she would run now. It'd be a landslide. She'd beat anyone. Anyway, so I based my lead character, my president character, and her name is President Winfield, and women, an African American woman in her 70s, President Winfield. Think Oprah Winfrey. And for the lead character, and I had it in my head, I'm thinking Steve Carell. If I could cast this movie, Steve Carell is the lead character, right? He's an everyman. He's a wonderful everyman. He's funny. He's sad, right? He's everything. And Oprah Winfrey's the president of the United States. They bring him to the president. He's in her office. Obviously, he has clothes on now. All the military, the vice president, the heads of CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, everyone's in the office. And the president goes, Mr. Tuckerman, who are you? Who the hell are you? How did this happen? How did these unbelievable aliens come to present you to the world? This Madam President, I don't have the slightest idea. I have no idea what's happening to me. All I was trying to do was kill myself on my birthday. I hate my life. I just wanted my life to be dead. And here I am 12 hours later. I'm with the President of the United States. He goes, I have no idea. I don't have the slightest idea why I'm here. The president and her people decide that the aliens' pronouncement to mankind was sincere. They watched the tape over and over, and they said, you know what, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. So they set up the lead character at the United Nations. They give him an office at the United Nations. In so doing, the president reunites him with his long-lost son and his long-lost daughter. And so it becomes a family reunion. Now, unfortunately, in my life, my son and I are estranged. I've not talked to my son in 4 years. It breaks my heart every single day. I do not talk to my son. He does not talk to me. It's a very awful story. He lives in Alaska. My daughter lives 10 minutes from my house, and my daughter's my best friend. I see her almost every day. So it was a wish fulfillment for me to reunite with my son. That was part of the story. He's at the UN, and he says, okay, what are mankind's problems? He asked his staff, what are our problems? And they take out a giant whiteboard and they write nuclear weapons, climate, global climate warming, cancer, mental illness, gun violence, sex discrimination. They write down all the things on the board. And in the next 100 pages of the book, Jonathan, the lead character, meets with the aliens. They come to the UN once a month. They beam him on board. They go, Mr. Tuckerman, what would you like us to do for mankind? First time he's on there, he goes, let's get rid of nuclear weapons. Gotta get rid of nuclear weapons.
Everyone's number one wish.
That would be really thick. I mean, what if you could only get one wish from aliens? If you only had one, you might as well start with the big one.
Right.
They go, okay, we're going to eliminate all nuclear and biological. He throws in biological. And then within a week, all nuclear weapons around the world, they're all gone. They're dissipated. They're made useless because of their technologies. The New York Times runs a headline, no nukes. Huge, huge headline, no nukes. Remember in the 70s and 80s, rock stars used to do no nukes?
Oh, yeah.
You remember. We're peers. There was the famous No Nukes concert in Madison Square Garden. So the New York Times, in my book, no nukes. And thanks to Mr. Tuckerman, whoever he is, and his aliens, whoever they are, the world is no longer in nuclear. We're no longer in the nuclear age. So after the first month, he becomes a hero. People are calling him and coming to his office at the UN, thanking him. He's like, what the hell? This is unbelievable. I can't believe this. So during the course of the book, he cures every physical disease. He cures every mental illness. He ends famine around the world. The aliens provide manna from heaven, like from the Bible. According to ancient alien theory in the Bible, manna was some kind of algae food that aliens or God gave to the Israelites. Well, in my book, the aliens drop manna from heaven all over the world to those who are experiencing famine. So they end famine. Then they provide clean water all over the world to people that don't have clean water. Every month, then they eliminate anger from human beings. So people that have guns decide, I don't need guns anymore. I'm not angry anymore. Every month for a year, they eliminate a major concern on planet Earth. At the end of a year, Richard, this guy, Jonathan, wins the Nobel Peace Prize. He's the most famous man in the world. He's best friends with the President of the United States. He falls in love with a doctor who he meets early on, beautiful woman doctor, I think Anne Hathaway. He falls in love with her and gets married. So on day one, he's drowning on his 70th birthday because his life sucks. 1 year later, he's the most famous man in the world. He's world famous, best friends with the president, in love with a beautiful woman. He's got his children back, and everywhere he goes, people call him the hero of the earth. And he wins the Nobel Peace Prize. That's the first third of my book. And I get the children just telling you because I think if that alone could ever really happen or be a movie, I think that would be one.
It sounds like almost sort of a utopian vision of the future. Do you have that kind of a? I sense in you a want and need for peace in the world, as you know, as in myself. Am I getting that?
I would think for sure. Again, I'll be 67. Mentally, I'm about 12 or 13. I'm a painfully immature person.
And
But
we grew up in the same world with the constant threat of, nuclear destruction in our youth, and really still even now today, even worse probably today, because I can remember a time when they were telling us to in the event of a nuclear event, hide under the desk or whatever, and we had drills on occasion. It was.
I remember duck and cover in second grade. We had duck and cover under our desk, and we had some fire drills where we went into the basement of our school and crouched. So you and I are peers. So yeah, that was our era.
Yeah, and it was frightful. But I think I don't know, when I was younger, I had a lot of interest in space. Were you interested in things like that when you were younger? Space exploration and the astronauts and all that stuff?
Very, very much, very much. My dad and I watched all the launches. When men walked on the moon, my father cried. Sat with my father. He was crying. He cried. I mean, I saw that live with him. I was like, wow, if my father, who I never saw, really showed emotion of much of any kind, for him to be crying, I'm like, okay, this is, I'm just 13. I'm like, oh, this is a pretty big deal. Absolutely. I collected all the magazines, the Apollo magazines, and Neil and Buzz. I met Buzz Aldrin 3 different times. Here's a funny story. The second 2 times I met him, he was fine. The first time I met Buzz Aldrin, 1994, I think. 1994, I believe, or 1993. I was the publicist for Space Center Houston, which is a huge museum in Houston. I had a client that designed Space Center Houston. I was one of the publicists for the grand opening. And Buzz Aldrin was one of the guest stars. And before the event started, I was walking like with my head turned, and I bumped into Buzz Aldrin, like we bumped into each other. And I go, Mr. Aldrin, oh my God. I go, what an honor to meet you. And I put out my hand and he looks at me and he goes, I'll bet it is. Didn't shake my hand. I'll bet it is. Turned and walked away. I'll bet it is.
What a warm human being.
One of the heroes of every child of my era. I'll bet it. And I met him twice.
I bet it is, kid.
Leave me alone, you father.
You remember that Saturday Night Live? Well, I refer to that again. I'm sorry, but he's giving candy out to the kids, and the kids walk up to the door, and he says, "I'm Buzz Aldrin. I walked on the moon."
Never saw that.
Anyway, go on. You had some UFO experiences, haven't you? I mean, aside from the one you saw when you were a kid, the chevron-shaped object, you've had your own UFO experiences, right?
Right. Well, yes. So the first one was 1970 with my father. The second one was 1994. I was married, and my wife and I broke up in 92. She took my kids, my son and my daughter, to Lancaster, California. If people don't know, it's about an hour, 20 minutes northeast of Los Angeles. So my ex-wife and my kids moved to Lancaster. So every weekend for many years, I had to schlep out there after work so I could be with my children on the weekends. I never missed a weekend. One of those weekends was I think it was my son's 8th birthday. I got him a telescope, 6 or 8, 7 or 8, I don't know. I got him a telescope. We were looking at the night sky out in Lancaster, the dark black sky, beautiful stars. You can see clear. There's no smog out there. It's a beautiful sky. And we were looking and we saw Saturn. I think we saw Mars, and we looked at the moon, and it was wonderful. I put my kids to bed, and then I went back out in the yard to look again with my naked eye, and I looked up, and I happened to see in the far right-hand corner of beautiful clear sky, it was an egg-shaped, a bright light egg-shaped thing. I'd call it off-white, yellowish off-white color, but it looked like an egg. And it was from the right-hand part of the sky, and it traveled very, very quickly, very bright, with a straight line all the way across the sky as far as the eye could see. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. It's a satellite. Clearly, clearly, I'm looking at a satellite, which I'd never seen. I thought I had to be very, very bright. I'm watching. Then it stops. Richard, it stopped for about 30 seconds in place. Then I'm like, I wonder why it stopped. What's wrong with it, right? Something happened. Then it reversed course and it went back all the way the same route that it came from. And I was looking around like, where's the TV news when you need them? Like, I didn't have my cell phone. Like, where's documentation when you need it? Because clearly it wasn't a satellite, a comet, a meteor, an asteroid. Nothing goes like that, stops, and then goes back to where it came from. So to this day, I can't imagine that was man-made, whatever that was.
Why are you so fascinated with this particular subject? Is it just simply because of those experiences that you had when you were younger? Or, and I guess I could almost ask the question of myself, because I think we share that particular interest, but why are you so fascinated with this particular subject? Is it that you think that we may be visited by aliens? And I sense a sort of a desire in yourself that the visitors, or some visitors would come and show us a better way. I mean, is that why are you so fascinated with all? Is that part of it?
Yes. Let me tell you about my third sighting, and then I will directly answer your question. My third and last sighting was in 2008. I went to James Gilliland's ESETI Ranch. You're familiar with? I'm sure you.
Of course, yes.
I had a girlfriend. She and I went. We spent the weekend at James Gilliland's Ranch, 2008. And during the day, people like William Henry, I think maybe Nick Pope was there. Lectures, seminars, films, wonderful information. And then at night, they build a bonfire. He's on a ranch at the base of Mount Adams, as you know, but maybe not everyone knows. It's in Washington State at the base of Mount Adams. First night, bonfire, guitars, tambourines, people singing and dancing and chanting, and women dancing around the fire. And look, Friday night, I'm looking, nothing happens. Saturday, seminar, Saturday night, the fire, the dancing, chanting. I'm looking up, I'm like, come on, I want to see something. I want to see something while I'm Saturday, nothing, absolutely nothing. Third day, Sunday, more seminar, more films. Again, Sunday night, the fire, the dancing. And I said to my girlfriend, Barbara, I said, you know what, let's leave early to beat the traffic because we have a long way to go. And at like 5 minutes after Richard Lennis, after I said that, something, I think it was a teardrop shape, but something came out of nowhere. It was dark black background, and the underneath part was bright emerald green, like beautiful emerald green, like the Wizard of Oz, like the Emerald City in the Wizard of Oz. And it flashed on and off 3 or 4 times. Bright green, flashed, stopped over our heads, flashed on and off as if to say, hello, we're here, we see you, we recognize you, we just wanted to say hello, and hope you have a nice day. And we're all looking straight up at this beautiful thing, and then it just completely took off, vanished in seconds. I cried, people hugging, kissing, were crying, hugging. I mean, it was like, okay, talk about an experience. That was my third experience. That was the most remarkably moving one. To answer your question, I forgot about the event with my dad until 2007. So when I saw the big silver V with my dad, it was 1970. I completely and totally forgot that happened in my life until I was in a bookstore in the year 2007. And I found myself in the paranormal books aisle. And I saw all these books, Richard Dolan and Leslie Kean and Eric Von Daniken and all of our heroes. And I'm just, aliens, Rick Hoagland. I'm like, bases on Mars, bases on Moon, ETs, flying saucers. Is there life? after death, ghosts, poltergeists, paranormal. I, I had never seen a paranormal bookstore aisle in my life. Never. So while I was in there, I remembered the sighting with my dad. Didn't remember the wink, but I remembered the sighting, and I'm like, this is a big subject that I know absolutely nothing about. I don't know the first thing about this, but look at all these books. I bought as many books as I think I bought 12 books, many as I could carry. I read them all. I'm like, wow, my education is sorely lacking. A week later, I joined MUFON LA. And I started going to the meetings in Studio City here in California. One of the early meetings, Richard, was Giorgio Tsoukalos. One of the early ones was Giorgio, and he presented ancient alien theory for 90 minutes.
Oh, amazing. Oh, gosh, I wish I would have been a fly on the wall for that one, you know?
This is 2007, right?
Right.
That show debuted in 2009, 2010. This is before the show was on. And I swear I have chills telling you this story, but I swear this is true. During his talk, I had tears in my eyes. He's showing like the pyramids and undersea cities that are 50, 100,000 years old that are under the seas, and references in the Bibles and the Anunnaki. And I'm like, oh my God. I swear I had light bulbs and tears. I'm like, this is it. What he's saying to me right now explains the history of mankind. Nothing serious. I never learned this from my parents. I never learned this from my rabbi. I never learned this from my teachers. What this guy with the funny hair is talking about, it fascinated me to no end. This is 2007. At the end, I went up to him. I shook his hand. I hugged him. I go, Giorgio, you have no idea what your talk just meant to me. I said, you just opened my eyes to a whole new world. And from that day till today, I've been researching, studying, going to meetings and all these things. That's where my passion came from that talk.
Do you subscribe to that notion that clearly you're interested in the notion that we were visited in the past by someone or you know, maybe a variety of beings that may have been mistaken for gods, perhaps, and perhaps gave us some at least some roads to travel down regarding our technology? Is that what I'm getting?
Yes, absolutely, for sure. I mean, just in the Hebrew Bible, the story of Moses during Exodus, you know, the parting of the Red Sea. There was a pillar of my first page of my book. I don't know, right here. This is the very first page of my book. This is from Exodus. The Lord went before the Israelites by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. Exodus 13:21. Think about that. That's unbelievable. Pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud. That's a cigar-shaped UFO.
It sure does sound reminiscent of something like that, a pillar in the sky that glows at night. And you know, if that report were to come in today, you could almost say that it was one of Elon Musk's launches early. But of course, they didn't have anything like that, you know, 5,000 years ago.
Right. When I saw, Giorgio may have cited that at his lecture, but you know, the parting of the Red Sea, manna from heaven. Just think about that alone. The Israelites wandered for 40 years. Well, whether if that was real calendar 40 years or a different measurement of time, they were in the desert for quite some time. There's no food or water in the desert, really. And they survived manna from heaven. Now, I've been out in the rain many, many times. I don't remember having food like something, you know, that you'd eat from the sky, right? That was directed. Manna from heaven was directed so the Israelites would not starve to death. I met a woman named Ella Levain the other day at UFO Con. I don't know if you know her. She's a 6-book author. She's a scholar of Israeli and Hebrew scripture. And she told me that she believes that the Hebrew people were the first people to receive alien DNA, and that's why the Israelites were deemed the chosen ones. They were the first human race to have gotten some of the DNA from the aliens, whatever year that was. And she said that's why, to this day there's a lot of anti-Semitism and people rally against Jewish people. It could be why we're the special or why we're the chosen race. I thought that was interesting. I had not heard that before.
Oh, yeah, that is interesting. You were also this is at Alien Con that you were speaking with her.
This is at UFO Con last weekend, a week ago now, in San Francisco. I was at UFO Con. I met Stephen Bassett.
Oh, yeah.
Who when I told him I was a publicist, he goes, "You're a publicist? Oh my God!" And he literally threw 2 business cards. He goes, "We got to work together, Dan. We got to work together." So he and I are going to be talking soon. I met Jeremy Scott. I met I forget his name now. I met quite a few John Cain, Cain, quite a few experiencers, interesting people.
You met our own Ron James, I'm assuming, right? From MUFON TV, MUFON Films. Ron James, he just has a brand new movie out. Accidental Truth. Accidental Truth. You're going to have to watch that. I've pre-screened it. It's an amazing movie. I think one of the best, if not the best, UFO documentary I've ever seen. It's amazing. But we're not here to talk about that. I just wanted to see if you met him.
No, I met him at Alien Con, so that was a few weeks earlier.
Oh, okay.
I met everyone at Alien Con. I met Ron James. I met Earl Grey Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
Who is resurrecting MUFON LA, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's resurrecting. April 30th is the first meeting.
Wonderful.
They've been down for 3 years. He's going to have me talk about my book, I think, in May. I met Eric Von Daniken. I met Giorgio again. It's the 3rd time I met Giorgio. I hugged him. I go, "Thanks again for changing my life." He goes, "You're welcome, man." He goes, "Don't tell anyone, but it's all smoke and mirrors." That's what he said. Giorgio said, "Don't tell anyone, it's all smoke and mirrors." I met Nick Pope. Nick Pope gave me my book quote, "A Delightful Tale of Wonder and Hope." I met William Henry. I met Paul Hynek. I met George Knapp. I met Jeremy Corbell. I met a lot of people, and I gave everyone my book. I said, "I'd like to gift this book to you." And they all told me, Eric Von Daniken said, "Oh, I haven't seen this one yet." I go, "Eric, it just came out 2 days ago."
Well, you met Steven Spielberg at some point, didn't you?
Yeah. And in retrospect, I blew that one. I met Steven Spielberg.
I think it'd probably be pretty easy to blow it with Steven Spielberg somehow. I mean, you're getting nervous anyway, and I can imagine. But tell us about that.
Well, here's what I said, which is very funny, and here's what I should have said had I had more time. I'm a Hollywood publicist for 40 years, and I've worked with a lot of major people. But in 2010, Universal Studios had an event in their backlot after a fire had destroyed the Universal backlot in 2008. There was a big fire. It took 2 years for them to rebuild the backlot at Universal. So now 2010, Spielberg and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was the governor of California at the time, were the special guest stars at this event. And I was one of the publicists for the media at that event. So they both spoke and they cut the ribbon, and there were cameras and everywhere. And then all the media, there were media from all over the world. And everyone was Arnold, Governor Arnold. Everyone just wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger. All the media down the line. And here's Steven Spielberg standing in literally in the shadow by himself. So here's Arnold, and everything in the world revolved around Arnold. And here's Steven Spielberg by himself, like he didn't have a friend in the world. And I looked at, I'm like, listen, there's something very wrong with this picture. Most creative genius next to Walt Disney who ever lived. And Arnold Schwarzenegger? Really? Really? If you're going to pick, you want Arnold over Spielberg? So I said to myself, I'm going to have to think of something special to say to Stephen. I knew I'd meet him eventually. Now, Stephen's mother had a restaurant a block from my house for years and years and years called the Milky Way. And it was a kosher dairy restaurant. Now, every time my mother used to come to visit me from New Jersey for years and years, I would take my mother to Spielberg's mother's restaurant, and we would sit and have lunch with Leah Adler, Steven Spielberg's mother. Okay. So I knew Steven Spielberg's mother for years. So when I'm walking to meet Steven Spielberg, he's by himself. And I go, Steven, my name is Dan. We put out our hands. And I go like this. I go, your mother makes the best blintzes I've ever had in my life. He looked at me and goes, you know what? You're right. My mother does make the best blintzes in the world, doesn't she? I go, absolutely. I go, I've eaten at your mother's place many times. So we bonded talking about his mother. And then I asked him to do some media, which he did. And then I asked him, could I get a picture with you? And he said, yes, I have a wonderful picture of me with Spielberg. Now, here's what I should have done, Richard, in retrospect. I should have said to him, did President Reagan really tell you
Right.
ET at the White House? Did President Reagan really say to you, Stephen, you have no idea how accurate this really is? I wish I had said that to him, because that would have been great to see his response, you know?
Yeah, it really would have. I would hope to be in a position to maybe ask Stephen that someday, but I did see an interview with him recently where he essentially said, I think it was actually with Stephen Colbert, and he was talking about the UFO issue, and he was saying that he really does think that there's something out there. He didn't comment on the Reagan stuff. Yeah, there's something else interesting about you, and that is your connection to Hans Holzer. And when I was a kid, when I was younger, I read his books intensely, and I just found them absolutely fascinating. He was a very famous ghost hunter, and so you have a connection to him, don't you?
He was the world's first ghost hunter, like literally the world's first acknowledged ghost hunter. So again, I'm a publicist. One of my clients a few years ago did a documentary film on the Amityville horror murders, the true story behind the murders at Amityville. And one of the psychic ghost hunter paranormal researchers he interviewed for his documentary is a woman named Alexandra Holzer, who I'd never heard of. This is a good 10 years ago. So Alexandra Holzer reached out and said, Dan, can you help me get some publicity for me? I said, sure, who are you? And she said, you know, I'm a ghost hunter, I'm a psychic, I'm a healer, I'm a spiritualist. And by the way, my father was Hans Holzer. So if you look up Hans Holzer, this is a major guy. He was friends with Danny Aykroyd, and Danny Aykroyd apparently was inspired to write Ghostbusters, sort of in honor of, or as an homage to, Dr. Hans Holzer. So Alex Holzer and I have been friends for about 10 years. I've gotten her some publicity over the years. She's written books. She's been on some ghost TV shows. And I just think it's fascinating that her father was the most famous ghost hunter who ever lived.
Yeah, I found his books fascinating. Did you read them when you were younger? Were you aware of his books?
No. I didn't get into ghosts and all these things. I'll tell you this side story. I have another book coming out in January. It's called My Paranormal Life, Supernatural Stories from a Hollywood Insider. It's coming out in January by a UK publishing company. I've had experiences with my dead father as a ghost. I had a poltergeist in my house in Beverly Hills, who I'm quite convinced was my grandfather, because he wrote his name on a Ouija board, and I asked him where he was from on a Ouija board, and he wrote Syria. That was my grandfather. My grandfather was breaking glasses and knocking on doors and slamming doors and breaking things in my house. And it was we had a poltergeist, and it was my grandfather. So anyway, I have a lot of peculiar non-UFO stories as well. So Alexandra gave me a quote for that book. That book comes out in January, My Paranormal Life.
You also had a relationship or have a friendship with Dee Wallace.
Dee Wallace is a very dear friend of mine. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady. In fact, here, I can reach this. That was at Monster Palooza last summer. You can see that.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, we can. Yeah. Dee Wallace from E.T., right?
Dee Wallace from E.T. and Cujo, right? It's another one. And The Howling. In the late 80s, early 90s, Dee was the star of a TV show called The New Lassie, of all things. Not Lassie from the 50s or from our era. The New Lassie. I was the publicist for The New Lassie. So Dee and I, for about 4 years, became very good friends. And during that time, my now ex-wife, but my then wife, was pregnant with my daughter. And she had a very bad pregnancy. She was ill in bed for weeks and weeks. She couldn't keep any food or water down. And I mentioned this to Dee one day at lunch on the set of The New Lassie. And Dee said, I'm going to send you my acupuncturist to your house as a gift. And my acupuncturist will cure your wife. And the guy came to my house 3 times, did pins and needles in my ex-wife. And as soon as he did the 3rd session, my wife got out of bed. She could eat, she could drink, and she was fine the rest of that pregnancy. It was the nicest thing a celebrity ever did for me. And she's a woman with a heart of gold. Last year, when my first book came out, Flirting with Fame, I did a presentation in Hollywood, and Dee introduced me. And we hugged and kissed, and I said, Dee Wallace, I love you. She's just a wonderful woman, very dear friend of mine.
I need to ask you, and I think that it's important for our audience to know where they can get your book. How can they obtain your book?
Sure. After they came, the easiest way is Amazon. It's Kindle version and print. I am talking to a voiceover artist about possibly doing an audio version. So that does not exist yet. But after they came, Dan Harari, Harary, Amazon, Kindle, or print. You can read more about me, danharariauthor.com. All my books and my writings are danharariauthor.com.
Well, Dan, it's been wonderful having you on the program tonight. I really enjoyed talking about your life and in particular your book. And it seems like we've got a lot of things in common, in particular our interest in music and our interest in particular in the percussive instruments. And I really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. MUFON is an important organization and what you all do, especially in this era. I'll end with this. Steve Bassett at UFOCon, he has a new hashtag, and it says hashtag months, not years. Months, not years. He thinks we're very close. And, given the 3 items that we shot down over Canada a month ago that no one ever told us to this day what they are, clearly those were not man-made because we would have heard what they were by now. So I'm hoping Steve Bassett is right. I always tell my daughter, I hope I live to see disclosure. But if not, I'll tell her, she's 33. I say, I really hope you live to see disclosure. It needs to happen. The time has come. We're not going to freak out and kill each other in the streets. It'll change a lot of things, but it'll open our eyes. And you asked me earlier about aliens. I hope they're benevolent, man. If they're giant wasps and they're coming to eat us, or like in the Twilight Zone episode, to serve man, remember?
Yes, I do.
Get on the ship. It's a cookbook to serve man. It's a cookbook. It's 2 years old. So I'm like, oh my God, you're going to eat men. So I wrote a book that they're nice. They're beautiful. They look like Brad Pitt and Blake Lively. They're gorgeous, blonde, beautiful people. And they come to help us. What's so wrong with that? Why can't they come and be nice?
Well, I hope things turn out like that. I appreciate it, Dan. I really appreciate the time you spent with us tonight. I really do.
You are not alone. Thousands of people all over the world have sightings of UFOs per month. MUFON is the place to report them. Since 1969, MUFON has been investigating UFO reports and providing this information to the public. Our aim